They said it was just another harmless Halloween experiment. A night of science, mystery, and entertainment. But what happened that evening was something no one could explain, and no one was ever supposed to find out. It began inside a secluded research facility, hidden deep within the woods. Scientists gathered to test a new kind of energy technology, one that could allegedly bend perception, even alter dimensions. To the public, it was framed as a Halloween special, an interactive illusion. But behind the cameras, behind the laughter, there was fear, because no one fully understood what they were awakening. At exactly midnight, the countdown began. The energy surge spiked, lights flickered, and a strange frequency filled the air. A sound so low it rattled the bones. The audience thought it was all part of the act until the screams started. Not the fake kind. The kind that freezes your blood. Equipment malfunctioned, the power grid collapsed, and for 17 terrifying minutes, no one inside the lab could be reached. When rescue teams finally entered, the scene they found was impossible to describe. Papers scattered, machines melted, and walls etched with symbols no one could have drawn. The official report called it an isolated accident. The footage was confiscated, the participants silenced, and the experiment's name erased from every database. But fragments of that night survived, in whispers, in leaked memos, in strange energy readings still recorded around the site every Halloween since. Was it a portal, a glitch in reality, or something that responded to the experiment's call? No one knows for sure. But one thing remains clear. Some experiments are meant to stay in the dark. And every year, as Halloween approaches, those who were there say the air still hums with that same unearthly frequency, as if the experiment never really ended. They always believed they could control it. Every switch, every spark, every pulse of electricity in that dimly lit laboratory was supposed to obey them. Decades of precision, data, and equations had convinced the human mind that there was nothing in this universe that couldn't be measured, contained, or explained. Yet, on that single night, under the cold blue light of a dying October moon, all that certainty began to unravel. It began as a whisper, not of sound, but of intention. A simple experiment, they said, an attempt to merge technology and human consciousness to see if thought alone could influence energy. They called it the Threshold Project, a poetic name, really, because that's exactly what it was. A threshold between everything known and everything we were never meant to touch. Inside the room, the air smelled of ozone and burnt copper. Machines hummed with a soft, rhythmic vibration, like a living thing holding its breath. The scientists stood around a single glass chamber. A design so sleek it seemed almost alien. Wires coiled like veins around it, connecting to computers that blinked in nervous patterns. They believed they were safe. They believed control was the essence of intelligence. What they didn't know was that control is the first illusion that abandons you when the unknown starts to wake. The experiment began with calm precision. They initiated the power sequence, and the energy field within the chamber began to twist and shimmer, folding light like silk in water. For a moment, it was beautiful. There was silence, a heartbeat's pause, the soft gasp of awe that comes when humans think they've just touched the future. But beauty has always been the disguise of danger, and as the energy stabilized, something in the room shifted. A flicker in the monitors, a sudden drop in temperature. Then, nothing. At least, nothing they could measure. Later, when the footage was reviewed, though most of it was corrupted beyond repair, the frames that survived showed something strange. A shadow, faint at first, then spreading, not cast by any object, not aligned with any light. It grew as if it were absorbing color itself, feeding on the room's reality. And when the field collapsed, the shadow vanished. But so did 3 of the scientists. Gone, no trace, no screams, just the echo of static. The survivors were found hours later wandering outside the facility, barefoot and shivering, their eyes unfocused, their minds unreachable. All they could whisper was the same phrase, over and over. We opened it. No one knew what they meant. The government sealed the site, scrubbed every record, and filed the incident under experimental malfunction. But rumors spread like wildfire among those who once worked there. People who couldn't sleep without hearing that same low-frequency hum that used to pulse through the lab. Some said they saw reflections that didn't move with them. Others swore that their dreams were no longer their own. And yet, as always, curiosity didn't die there. It never does. Humanity has this insatiable need to understand the things that frighten it most. It's what makes us inventors and explorers and destroyers. Every generation convinces itself that it can do better, that it can play closer to the flame without being burned. They tell themselves the last failure was only because of poor control, or inadequate safety measures, or insufficient data. But the truth is far simpler. Some things don't obey control because they were never part of our world to begin with. Think of it, we map galaxies light years away, yet we barely understand the pulse of our own consciousness. We build machines that think, speak, even dream. But do we ever ask what dreams they have when we're not watching? The line between science and the supernatural isn't made of facts or faith. It's made of humility. And once you erase that, you invite chaos to sit at your table. Those who survived the Threshold Project lived with that chaos. They aged quickly, their memories fractured like broken glass. Some vanished without reason. Others scribbled unreadable equations on walls before losing their minds entirely. And still, the data they left behind tempted others. Private corporations, black budget divisions, anonymous research groups. All wanted a piece of the forbidden. Because where logic ends, obsession begins. One team tried to replicate the experiment years later. They said they were improving the containment field, eliminating the anomalous distortions. But you can't contain what isn't of this world. They, too, disappeared. Not all at once, but slowly, one by one. First, the communications failed. Then the power systems glitched. And then silence. When investigators entered days later, they found all the computers running the same code sequence, a pattern looping endlessly. When decoded, it spelled one word: return. What does that mean? Return to what? To where? No one can answer. And maybe that's the point. The arrogance of human reason is thinking that, because we can build something, we should. The moment you strip mystery from existence, you don't become a god. You become lost. You forget that the unknown isn't your enemy. It's your boundary. It's what keeps reality from collapsing into madness. When you push that boundary without reverence, it pushes back. And yet, even now, we're doing it again. Not in dark laboratories, but in digital realms, in artificial minds, in attempts to simulate souls. We're repeating the same experiment with different names. Every algorithm trained on human emotion Every sensor probing consciousness is a modern mirror of that night. The night humanity tried to control what should never have been captured. We've only changed the tools, not the hunger behind them. Do you ever notice how silence has a sound? That faint hum when everything around you is still. Some say it's just electricity, others call it tinnitus. But what if it's more? What if it's the residue of that threshold? The echo of energy we touched and couldn't fully close. Because once you tear a hole in understanding, it doesn't vanish. It lingers, waiting for another curious hand to reach across. One of the engineers, before disappearing, left behind a final note, a single sentence that was half plea, half confession. It read, "The universe isn't empty, it's listening." Maybe that's why we were never meant to speak to it directly. Maybe some frequencies aren't meant for human voices, but humanity keeps listening anyway. We dig deeper, reach further, design smarter machines, and laugh in the face of the warning signs. We tell ourselves progress is worth the risk. And sometimes it is. But when progress demands that we trade wonder for control, something sacred breaks. Science, in its purest form, was never about domination. It was about awe, the recognition that the universe is infinitely larger, older, and wiser than we are. The moment we forget that, the supernatural doesn't need to find us. We summon it ourselves. There's a story one of the technicians told after the first experiment. The last coherent thing he ever said. He claimed that for a split second, just before the power surge, he saw something inside the chamber. Not a figure, not a ghost, but a reflection of the room. Except in that reflection, none of them were there. Just empty space, humming with static. Maybe that was the real experiment, showing us what existence looks like when curiosity goes too far. We've always walked the edge of discovery and destruction. Fire, electricity, the atom, the code. Every breakthrough has its ghost. Every invention is a bargain with forces we barely comprehend. And each time, we believe the same lie. This time, we're in control. But control is a temporary illusion. What you control today may consume you tomorrow. Sometimes I wonder if the experiment really ended at all. Maybe it continues in smaller ways. In every unexplained glitch, every blackout, every dream that feels too real. Maybe what they opened wasn't a door, but a mirror. And each of us carries a fragment of that reflection inside us now. Perhaps that's why we feel drawn to the darkness, why Halloween fascinates us, why stories of the unknown never fade. We're not just afraid of what's out there, we're afraid of what we've already awakened. Imagine, for a moment, that knowledge itself is alive, not metaphorically, but literally. It watches, adapts, waits for us to grow arrogant enough to reach for it. Each time we extend our hands, it pulls back the veil a little, showing us brilliance and terror in equal measure. And still we reach, because curiosity is not evil, it's our nature. But like fire, it must be respected. Those who lose that respect end up like the scientists that night, standing in the glow of their creation, believing they've mastered it, only to realize they've become part of it. There's a reason so many of history's geniuses end their lives in isolation or madness. They've seen too much. They've stared too long into the code of the cosmos and recognized that it's staring back. That is what spiraling beyond human understanding truly means. It's not just about losing control of a machine or a formula. It's about losing the illusion that we were ever in control to begin with. Once you see how fragile our order is, how thin the fabric of the known world really is, you start to hear the hum beneath everything. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Some say the threshold site still exists, buried under miles of reinforced concrete, sealed by protocols that no one dares to override. But others claim the building was never there to begin with, that it was just a projection, a construct built around a phenomenon we couldn't explain. If that's true, then the experiment didn't fail. It succeeded. It showed us that reality bends easily under belief, that the human mind, when amplified by technology, can rewrite its own environment. Maybe that's why we tell ourselves it went horribly wrong. It's easier to call something a failure than to admit it worked. Because if it worked, that means we touched something that was never meant for human hands. Something that now knows we exist. Even now, there are reports. Odd electromagnetic spikes around the old coordinates, distortions on radio bands, electronic devices flickering to life at midnight on October 31st. Coincidence, maybe. Or maybe the experiment is still echoing through time, looking for the next curious soul to finish what they started. The most controlled experiments, the ones built on precision and logic, often collapse because they forget the human element, the unpredictability of emotion, fear, and desire. Machines don't crave meaning, but people do, and when meaning isn't found, they create it, even if it costs them their sanity. That's what happened that night. The experiment didn't spiral because the math was wrong. It spiraled because the people behind it refused to accept that not everything can be solved. Humanity's greatest triumphs and greatest disasters have always shared the same origined curiosity unrestrained by humility. When we split the atom, we unlock power and peril. When we reached space, we touched wonder and loneliness. When we tried to touch the supernatural, we found ourselves reflected in its chaos. Each time, we learned too late that understanding isn't mastery, it's exposure. If you listen closely on quiet nights, especially near Halloween, you might hear it too. That faint vibration, that whisper of energy in the air, it's not a ghost story. It's a reminder. A reminder that even the sharpest minds, the most controlled systems, the most rational experiments can drift beyond comprehension the moment curiosity oversteps reverence. And once it does, it doesn't just change what we know. It changes who we are, because there's a cost to knowing too much. And sometimes, the cost is remembering that we were never meant to know at all. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, because once you open certain doors, they never truly close again. People like to believe that discovery is progress, that unveiling the hidden layers of reality brings clarity and control. But the truth is, every revelation comes with a shadow. The moment you expose something that was never meant to be touched, you also invite everything it was holding back, and once it looks back at you, you're never the same again. It began long before technology or science gave us the illusion of mastery. The first humans who looked into the night sky must have felt it, that pulse of awe and fear tangled together. The sense that there were things above them and within them that they could never explain. Instead of understanding, they built myths to protect themselves. Myths weren't ignorance, they were shields. They told stories about gods, spirits, and curses not because they were naive, but because they knew that naming something was safer than knowing it. They sensed that curiosity was both flame and fuel, and that too much of it could consume the soul. But generations passed, and humanity grew proud. We built machines to peer deeper into the atom, to listen beyond galaxies, to measure the heartbeat of time itself. Every mystery that fell made us bolder, more confident that the universe was just a puzzle waiting to be solved. The line between sacred and scientific blurred until it almost vanished. And yet, every so often, something happens that reminds us. Some mysteries aren't puzzles at all. They're warnings. There's a story I once heard from a physicist who worked on deep space signal analysis. Late one night, the computers detected a pattern, a rhythmic pulse buried beneath cosmic background noise. At first, they thought it was just a glitch, but the sequence repeated every 22 hours, precise and perfect, like a heartbeat. They tried to triangulate its source, but it didn't come from any known point in space. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. When they attempted to decode it, the data began corrupting itself, rewriting code, altering files. It was as if the signal was alive. After 3 days, the system crashed completely, and they were told to destroy all evidence. The official report called it a data anomaly. But the scientist said that for weeks after, he could still hear that pulse when he closed his eyes. Not in his ears, but inside his mind, like a second rhythm layered over his own heartbeat. He stopped working soon after. Some doors, he said, don't open outward. They open inward. Curiosity feels harmless until it rewires something inside you. That's the danger of knowledge without understanding. You think you're reaching outward toward the unknown, but the unknown is reaching back, reshaping you in ways you don't notice. Sometimes, the mystery isn't what's on the other side. It's what it does to the person who seeks it. That's why legends persist, not because the stories are true, but because the warning is. In a forgotten village centuries ago, there was a hill that no one climbed after dusk. The people said lights moved there, like lanterns carried by unseen hands. A scholar came one year, scoffing at the superstition. He climbed the hill one night to prove them wrong. He came back at sunrise, silent, pale, and trembling. He said he'd reached the summit and found an ancient door built into the stone. No handles, no hinges, but humming faintly, as though something behind it was breathing. He swore he heard whispers calling his name, not from beyond the door, but from within his own thoughts. Days later, he left the village without saying goodbye, muttering that he'd dreamt the door open, and that he'd seen his own shadow walk through it and never return. No one ever saw him again. You could call that story a myth, or you could call it a metaphor. But the message is the same. Some knowledge separates you from yourself. When you try to drag the unseen into the light, it doesn't just reveal truth. It exposes your limits. And sometimes, what you find beyond that limit isn't enlightenment, it's reflection. Modern science pretends it has no myths, but the labs and machines hum with the same ancient energy. We probe quantum states, black holes, neural maps of consciousness, all while whispering the same promise: we'll understand it this time. But maybe understanding isn't the point. Maybe mystery exists to remind us that humility isn't weakness. It's balance. There's something inside us that craves final answers. We tell ourselves that if we can just uncover one more secret, decode one more layer, we'll finally feel whole. But wholeness doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing when to stop asking. Because once you open certain doors, the ones that separate perception from reality, mind from machine, soul from signal, you can't close them again. The question starts echoing forever, and every answer you find only multiplies the silence. Imagine discovering a sound that no one else can hear. At first, it fascinates you. You record it, analyze it, isolate its frequency. Then one day, you realize it's not coming from outside at all. It's coming from inside your own mind. You've tuned yourself to something that shouldn't exist, and now it's part of you. That's what happens when mystery becomes possession. History is full of these moments. Alchemists chasing the philosopher's stone, monks translating forbidden texts, programmers writing code that generates itself. Each one believed they could master what they didn't understand. Each one believed they were the exception. And yet, time after time, their stories end the same way. Obsession, collapse, disappearance. It's not that the mystery punishes them. It's that they dissolve into it. We forget that curiosity is a kind of hunger. It feeds on the thrill of the unknown, but hunger doesn't know when to stop. And the more you feed it, the emptier you feel. That's why some scientists, some mystics, some dreamers disappear into their own discoveries. They go too deep, too far, and when they try to return, they find that the world they left behind no longer fits. The door doesn't close because they've changed. There's a laboratory sealed since the 1970s, where an experiment on neural resonance was conducted. The idea was simple: to synchronize human brainwaves through sound, linking multiple minds into a single shared awareness. The experiment succeeded, briefly. 5 participants described the same vision simultaneously: a vast empty plain under a sky with no stars. They said something moved there, slow and immense, noticing them all at once. When the resonance broke, 2 of the subjects went catatonic. One spoke a final sentence before his heart stopped. "It saw me back." The project was terminated, the room sealed, the data erased. But years later, when a team reopened the site for archival restoration, they reported hearing faint whispers through the walls. Whispering in 5 overlapping voices. You can explain such stories as stress, coincidence, imagination. Maybe they are, but even in imagination, truth hides. The human mind is not meant to bear every truth it can conceive. The structure of sanity depends on boundaries, on closed doors. Too many open ones, and meaning begins to collapse. That's what makes some mysteries sacred. They protect us by staying unsolved. But in our era of endless information, we've lost patience with mystery. We treat every question as a challenge, every unknown as a failure. We dissect beauty to find logic inside it, forgetting that sometimes beauty is the logic. We demand to see behind every curtain, and when we do, we realize there was nothing there. Only the echo of our own need to see. That emptiness frightens us, so we keep searching, opening more doors, chasing meaning through an infinite hallway that never ends. Yet, the most dangerous doors are not physical. They're internal, the ones that lead to the hidden rooms of the psyche. People think the mind is a single space, clear, navigable, rational. It isn't. It's a labyrinth of locked chambers. Some hold memories, others hold instincts, and a few hold things we never meant to create. Fears so powerful they start to live on their own. When you open those inner doors, you may find pieces of yourself you can't put back. Once a neuroscientist designed a machine that could record dreams by mapping electrical patterns. At first, it worked beautifully. Small, fragmented images, colors, flashes of emotion. Then, one night, the system recorded something while she was awake. A shape, moving behind her reflection in the lab window, even though no one else was there. She dismissed it as artifact interference. But when she looked back at the saved data, the same image appeared in multiple dream logs, all from different subjects. The same shadow, always standing in the same place. The project was abandoned. She never dreamed again. There's a strange mercy in ignorance. It protects wonder. When a child asks what makes the stars shine, the answer, magic, is truer than nuclear fusion. Because magic invites awe, not ownership. But we grow older and trade awe for explanation, until everything is just mechanism and data. The cost of solving every mystery is that the world becomes smaller, colder, predictable. But mystery keeps the world alive. It breathes space into meaning. Maybe that's why old legends say curiosity is a curse. Eve with the apple, Pandora with her box. Both opened doors they were told not to, not because of obedience, but because of longing. They wanted to know what was hidden, and when they did, they couldn't unknow it. The box never closed again. The garden never felt safe again. Those stories aren't about punishment, they're about transformation. Once knowledge expands your world, it also tears it apart. There's a quiet irony in how humans chase immortality through understanding. We build machines to preserve our minds, to decode consciousness, to escape the decay of the flesh. But what if mortality is the very thing that gives meaning to mystery? If you remove all endings, all limits, what remains? Just endless doors, all open, all leading nowhere. The act of not knowing is what gives depth to knowing. The act of restraint is what makes discovery sacred. Some mysteries are the scaffolding of reality itself. The fabric of time, the origin of thought, the presence we feel when we're alone, but not lonely. Pull too hard on those threads, and the pattern unravels. You think you're revealing truth, but you're actually erasing it. Because truth without mystery is hollow. Once you open certain doors, the world doesn't go back to how it was. The light changes. The silence deepens. You begin to notice small distortions, shadows moving slightly out of sync, echoes that take too long to fade. Your own reflection blinking a moment too late. Maybe it's paranoia. Or maybe it's the universe reminding you that you've seen too much. That's why some doors are better left closed, not out of fear, but out of reverence. The unknown is not our enemy. It's our teacher. But teachers are only kind when we listen, not when we demand. The mysteries that endure are the ones that guard balance. Between knowledge and awe, between courage and humility. When we force them open, we don't gain mastery. We lose wonder. So the next time you find yourself staring at something that calls to your curiosity, a symbol you can't decipher, a sound you can't trace, a feeling that seems to come from beyond, pause, listen, respect the silence around it. Because maybe, just maybe, that silence is the last barrier keeping the door closed. And once it's open, it may never close again.